What if I told you that some of the SUVs on the road right now are so mechanically sound, so fundamentally overbuilt, that their owners simply never get rid of them? Not because they can't afford to upgrade, because they've done the math, and the math keeps telling them to hold on. We're talking 200,000 miles, 350,000. Some of these platforms have documented examples pushing 500,000 miles on original powertrains, with nothing more than disciplined oil changes and basic fluid services standing between them and the scrapyard they never reached. Today, we're counting down the 10 SUVs built to last a lifetime. The platforms that were engineered with margins wide enough that normal daily use barely registers as stress. And the ones in the middle of this list, those are the ones most buyers walk past without understanding what they're looking at. Pay attention to those especially. Before we get into it, here's the context that makes everything else make sense. Modern automotive engineering is not optimized for longevity. It is optimized for the showroom. Fuel economy numbers, horsepower figures, feature counts, and interior materials that look exceptional on a test drive and degrade faster than they should. The industry moved to turbocharged small displacement engines because they produce impressive numbers at the testing stage. It moved to CVT transmissions because they improve efficiency figures by a fraction of a percent. It loaded vehicles with interconnected electronic architecture because software revenue is now a meaningful part of automaker business models. None of these decisions were made with the 300,000 mile owner in mind. Keep that in the back of your head as we go through this list, because the vehicles that belong on it share one defining characteristic. At some point in their development, somebody decided that longevity mattered more than the spec sheet. Starting at number 10, the Subaru Forester, specifically the 4th and 5th generations covering 2014 through today. Subaru's reliability reputation used to be complicated. The older EJ series Boxer engines earned a legitimate reputation for head gasket failures, and that history followed the brand for years longer than it deserved. But starting with the 2014 redesign, Subaru addressed the core engineering problems directly. They moved to a timing chain, revised the cooling architecture, and produced a vehicle that now accumulates mileage in a way the older generations simply couldn't. The Boxer layout, cylinders sitting horizontally rather than upright, is not just a marketing talking point. It lowers the center of gravity measurably, reduces vibration because opposing pistons cancel each other's motion, and distributes thermal stress differently than an inline or V configuration. Less vibration over hundreds of thousands of cycles means less fatigue on mounting hardware, gaskets, and ancillary components. Physics working in the owner's favor. The symmetrical all-wheel drive system has been in continuous development for decades and has been validated in conditions that make a New England winter look mild. It adds no meaningful complexity penalty because Subaru has refined it to the point where it operates as background infrastructure rather than an active system demanding maintenance attention. This is not a dramatic vehicle. It doesn't make a statement. It racks up miles quietly, costs very little to maintain, and keeps going. That combination is rarer than it sounds. Number 9, the Honda Pilot, 3rd generation, 2016 through 2022. 3 rows, a 3.5 liter V6, and a reliability record so consistent it borders on boring. Which is exactly the point. The reason the Pilot lasts is straightforward. It is almost never working hard. That V6 was engineered with stress tolerances well above what school runs and highway commutes can generate. An engine operating consistently below its thermal and mechanical limits experiences wear, at a fraction of the rate of one that's regularly pushed. Every mile in a Pilot is a mile the engine treats as light duty. Honda's decision to share core components across the Pilot, the Odyssey, and the Ridgeline had a direct reliability benefit. When you're manufacturing the same components at that volume, defects surface early and corrections happen fast. The result is a parts ecosystem that's been refined through millions of real-world examples, is available everywhere, and costs a fraction of what comparable European platform components cost. Any competent independent mechanic can service a Pilot without specialized tooling or dealership-only diagnostics. Number 8. The second generation Acura RDX 2013 through 2018. Pay attention here because this is one of the most overlooked value propositions in the used SUV market. Acura made a mistake with the third generation RDX. They installed a turbocharged 4-cylinder, paired it with a more complex transmission, and added an infotainment architecture that owners have criticized consistently since launch. The second generation is a completely different story. The 3.5-liter J-Series V6 in this RDX is one of Honda's most celebrated engine families. Simple architecture, wide power band, low specific output relative to displacement, which means it runs comfortably inside its limits at all times. The only scheduled maintenance item that requires real attention is the timing belt at 100,000 miles. Do that service once, and this engine will cover another 100,000 without requiring anything significant. The all-wheel drive system in this generation is mechanically simpler than the more advanced SHAWD setup that came later. Fewer active components means fewer failure points and lower fluid service costs. What you get is genuine luxury, a quiet, refined cabin, comfortable seats, and a ride quality that justifies the Acura badge at used car pricing with maintenance costs that belong on a Toyota. Number 7. The Honda CR-V, specifically the 4th and 5th generation models from 2012 through 2022, and 2 powertrain versions within that range worth distinguishing. The 2.4-liter K24 engine in the earlier generation is a benchmark for naturally aspirated reliability. It is simple, well understood by every technician in the country, has been produced in such volume that parts are universally available, and runs with an average annual maintenance cost around $400. That number includes everything. Owners at 220,000 miles are discussing whether to upgrade, and the answer they keep arriving at is no. The later hybrid version extends the argument further through a different mechanism. Mechanical simplicity through electrification. Honda's 2-motor hybrid system eliminates the traditional transmission almost entirely. The electric motor connects directly to the driven wheels, removing a complex mechanical system and replacing it with one that has almost no wear components in normal operation. Regenerative braking extends brake pad life dramatically. The fuel economy figures make 5-year ownership costs genuinely competitive with much cheaper vehicles once fuel is factored in. Number 6, the Mazda CX5, both generations from 2012 through today, and this one is consistently underestimated. Mazda took a deliberate engineering position that most manufacturers abandoned under regulatory and consumer pressure. Instead of shrinking displacement and adding forced induction, they developed a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter with a high compression ratio and an exhaust geometry that extracts efficiency without the thermal penalties of turbocharging. The Sky Active approach is not a marketing concept. It is a specific engineering philosophy, and it produces an engine that runs well inside its limits for extremely high mileages. The transmission decision is equally significant. While Nissan, Subaru, and others were committing fully to CVT units in the name of fuel economy, Mazda kept a conventional 6-speed torque converter automatic in the CX5. That single decision separates this vehicle from a substantial portion of its competition when it comes to long-term durability. CVTs underload in high temperatures or in vehicles used for towing, accumulate wear in ways that conventional automatics simply don't. The interior quality punches well above the price point. Owners consistently describe the cabin as comparable to entry-level German luxury vehicles. Annual maintenance costs average between $400 and $500. That is extraordinary for what this vehicle delivers. Number 5, the Toyota Highlander, 3rd and 4th generation, 2014 through today. Toyota's approach to the Highlander was systematic rather than innovative. Take established, proven components, share them across the Lexus RX and the Toyota Sienna. Produce them in sufficient volume that every failure mode surfaces quickly and gets corrected before it becomes endemic. The result is a 3-row family SUV built on one of the most mature component ecosystems in mainstream automotive manufacturing. The hybrid version deserves specific attention. Toyota's electric, continuously variable transmission is frequently confused with belt-driven CVT units, but the engineering is entirely different. It's a planetary gear set with no belts, no bands, and no clutch packs. Toyota has been running the same fundamental architecture since the first generation Prius. Highlander Hybrid owners are documenting 300,000 miles on original hybrid batteries and original ECVT units. That number is not a promotional claim. It is the documented outcome of conservative engineering combined with disciplined maintenance. 36 miles per gallon combined, 3 rows of seating, and a powertrain that has been torture tested by millions of real-world owners across 2 decades. Number 4, the Lexus RX, 3rd and 4th generation, 2010 through 2022. This is the benchmark, the vehicle that established the standard for luxury crossover reliability and has held that standard consistently for over 20 years. The 3.5-liter V6 in the RX 350 has been in production long enough that every potential weakness has been identified, addressed, and engineered out through incremental revisions. By the time you're buying a used 3rd or 4th generation RX, you are acquiring a powertrain that has been stress tested by millions of owners across hundreds of millions of collective miles. The financial comparison is where the argument becomes undeniable. A BMW X5 or Audi Q7 at 100,000 miles sends bills. Air suspension failures, electronic control module faults requiring dealer-only diagnostics, specialized brake components at premium prices. The RX at 100,000 miles typically needs tires and fluid changes. That gap in ownership cost over a 5 to 10 year period is not marginal. It is substantial and measurable. Early 2000s RX models are still in daily service. Original engines, cabin materials that held, ride quality that remained, the repair bills that didn't come. Number 3, the Toyota Sequoia, 2nd generation, 2008 through 2022. This is the vehicle with the most impressive raw numbers on the list. The Sequoia sits on the Tundra pickup platform. The same frame, axles, and cooling architecture designed for heavy commercial and towing applications. When you deploy truck-grade engineering primarily as a family hauler, Those components operate so far below their design limits that mechanical stress is essentially irrelevant during normal use. It is, deliberately, a case of engineering overkill applied to a suburban SUV. The 5.7-liter V8, Toyota's 3UR-FE, carries a reputation that genuinely borders on mythological. Tundra operators have documented this engine passing 1 million miles, not 100,000, 1 million. Toyota built it with an oversized cooling system and internal component tolerances that exceed what the engine's normal power output would require. That overbuilding is not accidental. It is the engineering philosophy expressed in metal. The supporting statistic, approximately 39% of second-generation Sequoias reach 250,000 miles. That figure is roughly 8 times the industry average for reaching that mileage threshold. It is not a brand loyalty metric. It is a durability outcome. Number 2, the Lexus GX460, second generation, 2010 through 2023. If you don't understand what this vehicle actually is beneath the exterior, you're missing the entire argument for it. The GX460 is a global Land Cruiser Prado wearing Lexus trim. The same fundamental platform that international aid organizations, military logistics operators, and commercial expedition contractors rely on. In environments where a mechanical failure means being stranded for days with no recovery infrastructure. Toyota did not design this vehicle for American suburbs. They designed it for operational conditions that make American suburbs look trivial. Then they appointed it with leather and quiet cabin insulation and gave it to Houston. The 4.6-liter V8 paired with a 6-speed automatic has been essentially unchanged across this entire production generation. When a powertrain runs unchanged for over a decade in production, it means every failure point has been identified and corrected. This engine runs reliably for hundreds of thousands of miles on disciplined oil change schedules and basic fluid maintenance. Nothing exotic required. The suspension design is a detail that deserves recognition. Lexus used a mechanical hydraulic stabilizer system rather than the electronic air suspension that fails expensively on European competitors. No sensors, no compressors, no ride height modules. A hydraulic system that operates passively and reliably without demanding electronic intervention. Fewer systems means fewer failures. The GX460 takes this principle seriously throughout its engineering. Number 1, the Toyota 4Runner, 5th generation, 2010 through 2024. Nobody is surprised. That's not a weakness of this vehicle's reputation. That's the entire definition of it. The 4Runner has been in production in essentially the same mechanical form for 14 years. While every other manufacturer was redesigning platforms to accommodate new turbocharged engines, 9 and 10-speed transmissions, and integrated infotainment architecture, Toyota kept the 4Runner exactly where it was. Owners are not merely tolerant of this, they are actively loyal to it because of it. The 4.0-liter V6 uses a timing chain, no service interval, no $1,200 replacement at 90,000 miles, no risk of catastrophic failure from a forgotten service. The 5-speed automatic transmission is considered by independent mechanics to be overbuilt relative to the vehicle's weight class and power output, which means it runs comfortably inside its design limits indefinitely under normal use. In the reliability world, the word boring from a mechanic is the highest evaluation a drivetrain can receive. Body-on-frame construction means this is structurally a truck, not a car with higher ground clearance. an actual truck platform. It handles off-road abuse, sustained high mileage stress, and daily use without developing the structural fatigue, the chassis flex, and the suspension degradation that unibody crossovers accumulate over time. The climate controls are physical knobs and switches, not a capacitive touchscreen with a software layer between you and the temperature setting, not a module that costs $3,000 to replace when the firmware becomes obsolete. Knobs that operate mechanically that will still work in 20 years without a software update. This is the cast iron skillet of the SUV segment. You use it for decades. You hand it down. It doesn't ask anything from you except maintenance. One addition deserves a dedicated mention before closing. The GMT 900K 2XX full-size platform from General Motors, specifically the Tahoe, Yukon, and Suburban from 2007 through 2020. These didn't make the main list because they require a more proactive ownership approach. Ignore them, and you're dismissing some of the most capable, high-mileage, full-size vehicles ever produced domestically. The LS-based V8 is a pushrod design. One camshaft in the block instead of two overhead. Fewer moving parts than a comparable overhead cam engine. The 5.3-liter variants with cast iron blocks handle heat and accumulated mileage with a durability advantage over aluminum block alternatives. When this engine is being used for family transport rather than sustained commercial towing, it operates well below its design thresholds every single day. The caveat is real. The active fuel management cylinder deactivation system causes lifter failures in owners who stretch oil change intervals. The solution is straightforward. An AFM disabler device runs about $50, plugs into the diagnostic port, keeps the engine in V8 mode permanently, and eliminates the issue entirely. Add a transmission cooler. Keep oil change intervals tight. Do those two things and this platform will run for decades with parts available at any shop in the country at prices that reflect actual competition rather than captive dealer pricing. The through line across everything on this list is the same. Natural aspiration where possible. Conventional transmissions with decades of refinement. Conservative component tuning that prioritizes stress margins over peak output numbers. Body on frame construction where the use case justifies it. And critically, platform maturity, meaning enough production time that every failure mode has been identified and addressed before you buy one. These vehicles are becoming genuinely rare, not because the engineering is difficult, but because the industry's incentives no longer point in this direction. Electrification timelines, emissions, compliance complexity, and software revenue models are eliminating the conditions under which vehicles like these get developed. Buy one of these platforms. Maintain it properly, not on an extended interval, not when it's convenient, on schedule, with the right fluids, with the right parts, and it will still be running when everything else on the road from this era has been recycled. In a market engineered for replacement cycles, holding onto something this durable is one of the most rational financial decisions a buyer can make.